Hello. Welcome to another Free Range American podcast episode. Today is a special treat. One of my new friends, someone that's, nonchalantly run into in the past before. We have some mutual friends, and we'll get into those. But I have Tim Parlatore with us today, attorney, but also Navy veteran. Tell us about that service first, Tim.
Oh, the Navy. I love the Navy. I've loved the Navy ever since I joined them at 18, but let's just say that they've made some pretty stupid mistakes over the past couple of years that I've been involved in exposing.
So, yeah, when did you attend? You were in Annapolis. You went to the Naval Academy. When did you attend out there?
So I graduated in class of 2002. Okay. So it was certainly a unique time period. We were the first class to graduate post 9/11. So I spent the first 3 years in post Cold War peacetime Navy, and all of a sudden graduate and head straight overseas. So that was a unique time.
And you were a surface warfare officer?
I was surface warfare. I was on a guided missile cruiser. Deployed 3 weeks after graduation, and then later in the reserves, did some time with Naval Security Forces.
So you guys were armed with tomahawks, probably?
Oh, yes.
Did you use some of those tomahawks?
We didn't. By the time we got there, Iraq hadn't started up yet. We were preparing to shoot tomahawks into Iraq, but then that got delayed until after we left. A lot of what we were doing was doing the boardings of all of the Al-Qaeda personnel running away, going from Afghanistan through Pakistan, jumping on boats, and then we'd catch them out at sea.
Oh, wow.
That and also air defense for the George Washington Carrier Battle Group.
So did you guys have a lot of Coast Guard with you, or is it your own Navy boarding team? Is it Master at Arms that does that?
No, it was a total Navy boarding team, mostly gunner's mates.
Okay.
Or as we call them, bosun mates with hunting licenses.
So how long did you do in the Navy?
I did 3 years active duty. I got off active duty a couple of years early because they were downsizing the community, and I wanted to go to law school. At the time, I was applying to try and get over into the Navy JAG Corps, but believe it or not, they said that I didn't meet their standard.
What? What standard is that? Zing!
I think it was an ethical standard.
Oh, yes. We're going to get into that.
Minimum and a maximum, and I was off.
So then, you went into the reserves, and then where'd you go to law school at?
I was at Brooklyn Law. So in New York City. Law school is one of those things where it's very regional. You try and go to school where you're actually going to practice because it's a lot of state law. And, my goal at that time, if the JAG Corps wasn't going to take me, was to do criminal defense work in New York City. So,
and that's where you started, right? Because you kind of cut your teeth with a lot of organized crime stuff.
I did, which was an interesting experience. It was kind of the end of the era of that type of work.
But what a realm to start a law career in. Well,
and being in the Navy gave me a lot of, maturity and experience and confidence to go into things that would ordinarily be terrifying. When I was a second-year law student, I was interning for an attorney, working on this big, high-profile, organized crime case. And so one day they had a meeting of all the co-defendants at the jail. We all go, all the attorneys and me, the law student. I got held up because, of course, my ID didn't match with the attorney IDs that they want. So when they finally let me in, I walk into this room that has the entire leadership structure of one of these, 5 crime families. And the only seat available in the room is the one right next to the boss. And having grown up watching, The Godfather and, of course, The Sopranos and everything, I walk in, the boss looks at me and says, "Oh, who the F is this?" And my client jumps up, "Oh, this is my lawyer. It's Tim." Well, he's not a lawyer. He's a law student. And the boss says, "Oh, yeah? Come here. You sit down right here." So I sit down next to him. He turns to me and he starts interrogating me on all these legal concepts. And I'm noticing out of the corner of my eye, all the other lawyers are getting absolutely terrified at what's going on. But I'm just answering the guy's questions. He finally sits back and says, all right, I like this kid.
What are some of these questions? Like, do you remember specifically?
Oh, yeah. It was intricate questions about, severances and suppression. And, this one counted. It's a murder, but they got no body. So how do they even prove the guy is dead? I mean, what's to say the guy didn't just run off to Mexico with his girlfriend? I mean, his wife is a bitch. And I'm sitting there like, but we could do that. We could do the Mexico defense. Yeah. What I didn't realize at the time was that the guy had spent close to 20 years in jail on, these smaller stints, life in prison and the installment plan. Most of it in solitary confinement where he did nothing but read books about the law. And so all the lawyers were terrified to answer his questions because he had spent hundreds of times more time studying the law than
just
any of us.
Memorizing and studying case law.
Yeah. So that was kind of my baptism by fire into that work.
That's great. And then, but still, what was it like that being your first criminal experience? Was you're on a giant defense team. How many lawyers was it?
There were 40 defendants. So there were, at least 40 lawyers. Several of them had, multiple lawyers. The case went on for years. And they, when the first guy pleads guilty, they then brought in a bunch of new people. Throughout the lifetime of that case, they had 3 different people that they at various times claimed, okay, well, now this is the lead defendant because we think he's the boss of the Genovese crime family. Okay, he pleaded guilty. Now we think this guy's the boss of the Genovese crime family. It was insane. It was a wild, long case.
That's just crazy. So when you finished law school,
I finished it, my boss looked at me and says, okay, Tim, you can do anything you want now, because after handling a case like that, everything else in the law is simple.
So you said it was 3 years?
Yeah, the whole case went on about 3 years.
So did you end up finishing law school before it was over?
So when I came into it, it had already been going for about a year.
Okay.
And it ended up, everybody getting sentenced right before I graduated.
Wow. And were you in the trials, some of those trials?
So actually, that was one of those ones that it ended up with everybody pleading guilty. Nobody pleading guilty to what they were originally charged with.
Yeah, so it was all just breaking everything down and serving it.
Exactly.
So when you graduated then, did you stick around in New York and continue kind of down that path? Because I imagine you had your name on this, so there's probably something else that came up that someone gave you a call for.
Yeah, no, it just progressed from that. And, I worked for another firm for a couple of years and then went out on my own. And, it's one of those things where lawyers, they don't often advertise, at least in those types of communities. And so, all of my advertising was on the pages of the New York Post about cases that I'd done. And so, you take a case and do a good job with it. And then all of a sudden you start getting calls from other people saying, hey, I saw what you did on this thing. So, here's my problem. Yeah. So, that kind of is where I built up my career and got a couple of nice big ones. So,
it's one of those things though, where you never, it's people can go their whole lives not knowing anything about this side of society, but unless you need it. Then when you need it, you realize you don't know anything about it. You don't know how to choose. I mean, I've been in this situation quite a few times where, even if it's as little as, I got a ticket in New Mexico or Fort Stockton, Texas. And it was like, how do I'm just trying to get this resolved. How do I choose the right attorney? Outside of yellow pages or weird ads or things like that, especially if you're going into something very specific like patent law or copyright infringement or business, certain different business dealings and things like that. It's like unless you have someone who's experienced that before that can recommend or something like that? Like, yeah,
Right.
how do you choose?
Yeah, it's tough. I mean, and I've sat on the other side of that table, obviously, for many years, where clients come in and they try and give me their problem, listen to them, I explain things to them, I tell them what their options are, and it's shocking to me how many of them look at me and say, Tim, we've interviewed 10 different lawyers before, and you're the first person that's ever actually explained what's going on here.
So people are more inclined to just get hired rather than it. Like have you ever turned any down? Like
a lot.
Where they feed you the story, you're like, I think I'm good on that.
Oh yes, the first time I sat across from a guy in a jail cell accused of murdering and dismembering a body, and so you want to hear how I did it? No, but yes.
And then we're done here.
And it was nice meeting you, and I wish you the best of luck. I often turn down cases. I look at it as, obviously I'm in this business to make money, but at the same time, I want to be able to help somebody. I want it to be somebody who needs help. And some people really don't need my help. And some people I look at and say, you know what, you're in this situation, you can probably qualify for a public defender. If your mom is not willing to pay for it, and you're better off there because you can give me a whole bunch of money and you're still going to go to jail for the rest of your life. So I'm not really, I don't need that.
How does somebody in that case track you down? That's already in prison and stuff. Like, where do you get those calls from? Family members?
Family members, friends. Sometimes I get calls from prison. That's why if you call me from a block number, I'm always going to answer because I never know if it's a jail call that I can't return.
Yeah.
So, but usually family members.
Okay. Well, so yeah, you talked about how, you like helping people, and that's kind of where our paths originally crossed. You are the lead attorney for Mr. Eddie Gallagher.
Yes.
A friend of ours. Which you've uncovered quite the stones when you flip those rocks over. Yeah, like you were saying when we first started the show. I love the Navy, except they've been fucking up lately.
It's true. It's true. It was a case that came to me. His family reached out to me actually through the former NYPD commissioner, Bernie Carrick. Mm-hmm. And it was a case that I read about in the newspapers, and it always kind of didn't sit right with me. It always seemed like there was something wrong with this case. And then, once they gave me the opportunity to dive past the headlines and see what was really into it, it was a mess, total mess. And so, that was a really important case for me. It was definitely an injustice that needed to be righted. And an institution that needs to be better.
Yeah, you and I had talked a few weeks ago, kind of jokingly, about how, Eddie was lucky that he kind of got the people involved when he did. He's like, because so many wrong things were happening that it quickly could have just been buried, and he could have sat in jail forever, and no one would have known, or he could have just been screwed over and rights completely ripped away from him, and processes and stuff completely ignored.
Yep.
And no one would have known had, the right people not got involved when they did. And I give a lot of credit to Andrea for that, because she was, she came from a politics background for campaigning. And when this started going down, she essentially just took everything that she knew when it came to campaigning to get people on board with something like, and transferred that to Eddie's case. And I think I strongly believe that's why he is in the position that he's in now, is because if he had any other situation where a wife or somebody that just said, "Oh, you're going to jail. All right, I'll see you later. We're divorced."
And that's the thing. There's a lot of guys that have been in the same situation as Eddie, and I would say the two things that really distinguished him were, one, that he was a Navy SEAL, and that kind of brought a whole different level of attention to it and also support from the community. And the other thing that distinguishes him is none of those guys, Rotting and Leavenworth, were married to Andrea Gallagher. That really, those two things really kind of came together to.
The third two, that he had a very good record, because that's another thing.
Yes.
We've been approached plenty of times in the last 8 years because of our reach and status and everything of, hey, can you help this thing out? And when I start digging into something like this and you see a pattern of behavior where it's like, oh man, I'm sorry, I can't stick my neck out for you because you've got this, and this on your record behind you that leads up to this. Like, so I don't know if I can even believe what you're saying at this point. Like,
yeah. And that was something for Eddie because he had such a great record and people were, willing to put their neck out for him. And one of the things that happened there is a lot of people, from the Pentagon started going around to those people sticking their necks out and saying, hey, walk away from this thing. You're going to get egg on your face. There's a video of the murder itself. And when that thing comes out, you're going to be really embarrassed. And it was a total lie. It was something that, it was
I did not know that piece.
Oh yeah. It was a total lie. I got a call one night from a congressman and he says, Tim, I just walked out of the White House and I was there with the White House Chief of Staff and some 2-star admiral came over to us and said, hey, you guys better stop talking about Eddie Gallagher because there's a videotape of him stabbing this terrorist. And he walks right out of the White House and calls me. And I said, hey, that's not true. Doesn't exist. I have all the videos. I want to show you the videos, but the judge won't let me. Yeah. And I actually went to the judge and told him this story to say, hey, can I get an exception to the protective order so I can go down to DC and show these videos to the members of Congress? And over the prosecution's vehement objection, he allowed me to do it. And that kind of stemmed a lot of the efforts that they were making to keep people away from this case.
Yeah, well, that's a key decision that you made that probably saved a lot of face too. Like,
yeah.
But yeah, I mean, you even said that the Air Force and the Army has had you out to speak to JAG. Tell me about that.
That's this case exposed so many problems in NCIS, in the Navy JAG Corps, in Naval Special Warfare Command. And a lot of that they try and cover up and they put the blinders on and try and think of anything other than we screwed up and somebody actually exposed us. And yet I've gotten calls from the Army, from the Air Force, even from the Marine Corps to come out and do training on what went wrong. And so I've been regularly going out and giving training to the other services to show them, hey, here's what the Navy did. Here's how to avoid getting into a similar situation. And I'm still waiting. I've made the offer. I'm still waiting for the Navy to invite me.
Now, in your opinion, what do you think the motive was on their side? Like, was this NCIS agents that were they wanted to get back at a SEAL? They wanted a win in a case? Like, what was the whole purpose of the landslide of collusion that went on? Because, and I'll preface this with, I've been involved in a military criminal case before, not against me. I was part of the court staff, so I was a bailiff.
Right.
But the entire trial was against a really good service member that had a impeccable record, and it was just a minor incident or infraction or whatever, what you will. But it just, when you saw the prosecution that were military officers, that were Air Force officers that are doing this, like, they are stretching everything so far to try and ruin this person's career and life, when despite the fact that the evidence in the story is coming out in the trial, that everybody's kind of going, wait, why are we all here? Like this,
Right.
this needs to be a commander handled like issue, and we could be on our way. But instead, you're overreaching and overstepping like as far as you possibly could stretch this stupid thing to get this win. Is that what happened there?
What do you think that the prosecutors, they were commissioned officers, right?
Yes.
What ranks were they?
They were both first lieutenants.
Okay. When they go up for major, what distinguishes them from their peers?
Wins.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that's exactly it.
But why?
As a civilian, if you're at the U.S. Attorney's Office, obviously having a good conviction rate helps you, but you can be a line prosecutor for your entire career. In the military, we have this rank structure that doesn't exist outside, where every one of those prosecutors is competing against all the other prosecutors to have the highest conviction rate so that they can break out from their peers and get the top ranking. And the problem is you have, the military legal community is small, it's closed, because it's only the people that started at the bottom and move up within that pyramid. And so unlike the U.S. Attorney's Office or other offices where somebody can be brought in at mid or high level to teach, to train, to lead, what you have is the people that pulled the dirty tricks to get ahead on the rankings are the ones that then become the supervisors. And it's just this cycle. That was something that was really obvious when I got into the Gallagher case, is that you see that all of these military attorneys, they're all following the same playbook, and they've all got this same command culture that doesn't necessarily prioritize ethics. And so when I came in doing something that was so far outside of the book that they were used to following, it put them into a completely uncomfortable situation where they didn't know what I was going to do next. From the NCIS side of things, you have an agency that is by and large staffed by incompetence. There are some good NCIS agents out there, but it's not what you see on TV.
No. I'll agree with you 100% because all my dealings with OSI, I know a few guys that I love that work over in that office, but the things that I've been through with them, it makes me go, what the hell is this organization about? Because the first thing that I'll say about them, they are supposed to be investigators. That's what they are. They're not there to pass judgment. They're there to get the story, get the facts. But that's the attitude that I've been faced with any run-in I've had with them. They already passed their judgment, and now they think we're in Law and Order, a cop show or something, and now we're playing the cop game and the interrogation thing, and it's like, meanwhile, it's like, dude, you're wearing the same uniform. You're here as an outside as an agency to investigate when fuckery is afoot.
Right. Here's the thing you got to remember. What's the primary qualification to become an NCIS agent?
Probably law enforcement background.
Here's what it is. If you want to be a federal agent, you go on usajobs.com and you upload your resume and you click all the different agencies you want to apply to. And in order to get a job at NCIS, generally you've also checked the boxes for FBI, DEA, ATF, all of those other agencies, and they've all rejected you. And this is the one down at the bottom that's actually giving you the job offer that you've accepted. So, you look at the lead agent on Eddie's case. He started out his career as a Border Patrol officer. He was in the Department of Homeland Security, so he could have skipped that whole hiring process if he was competent and gotten hired within the agency to an investigator position at ICE or HSI. He didn't. Instead, he somehow goes down to NCIS and very quickly demonstrated to us just total incompetence. But you have the incompetence that's then combined with a dangerous sense of ambition and confidence because, hey, we're NCIS, we're on the TV show. they feel like they've got this whole aura about them that's all
but
fake.
then they're comfortable with it completely acting illegally.
It's for the win. It's all for the win. Look,
Like,
when they
what?
when they get a case, again, you don't get promoted because you investigated a murder and then turned in a report saying, hey, no murder was committed. You get promoted because you get assigned a murder case and you come back and say, hey, here's the guy, I put cuffs on him.
This doesn't make sense to me. Like, why, like, even back to the JAG officers thing, like, how is promotion based on wins? Why isn't it just doing your job well and doing your job within the law? Like, hey, you know, there's going to be times where you prosecute somebody that you shouldn't be prosecuting. Doesn't mean you have to lie, cheat, and steal to make sure you still win. And a person that doesn't deserve to be punished goes to jail. Like, how is that not a balanced system?
It's a cultural problem. It's a cultural and an institutional problem that somebody needs to really examine and shake up the whole system. And
has
really
this caused investigations into the culture of the specifically Navy JAG?
They did a comprehensive review of the Navy JAG Corps culture. Nobody interviewed me. You know, so you know how much change went about. I mean, I'll tell you.
Not if somebody just shows up and says, "Hey, anything out of place here?" Nope, everything's fine. Everything's fine.
They investigated themselves. They cleared themselves of wrongdoing, and then they're continuing to do the same thing all over again. I mean, as you can probably guess, when anything goes wrong in Coronado and a Navy SEAL gets accused of something, who do you think they call? And whether I'm able to take on the case or not, I have a very tight finger on the pulse of what's going on out there, and the games are continuing. It's one of the reasons why Eddie and I decided to go into federal court against the Navy and NCIS, is because there has been no accountability whatsoever. Yeah. I mean, think about it. In any other circumstance, if your unit fails so miserably like this, the commander gets fired. Mm-hmm. The triad probably gets fired, and you come in and somebody, a strong leader is assigned there with orders to take control of this unit and change the command culture. None of that happened.
No, I mean, did anybody face any shred of punishment in this entire chain?
Well, they gave Navy achievement medals to the prosecutors, and then the president ordered those medals rescinded. But beyond that, and I've asked the question, but I've been, totally.
Despite that, and correct me if I'm wrong, there was straight law breaking that happened, both in NCIS and the JAG Corps. So you're allowed to break the law as a federal investigator and as a Navy officer that is a prosecuting attorney, and we're not going to even so much as reprimand any of these people?
I've been told that they're now finally starting an investigation into the lead prosecutor's misconduct. At the time that this all occurred, he had 19 years in, so they waited a year until he had 20. They allowed him to go out and retire, and then a month after his retirement ceremony, now we're finally going to look.
How convenient.
Yeah. So meanwhile, you take a guy like Eddie Gallagher, who didn't do anything wrong, and you try and put him in jail for the rest of his life.
And then when the jurors say that he's not guilty, then you try and take his rank and his retirement from him. How does that work? Like, how do you get acquitted and then they still come back and say, "Oh, well, we're reducing you in rank"?
He was convicted of one count. He was convicted of one count of being in a photograph with a dead terrorist.
Have you ever been to any World War II museum or Vietnam museum or Korean War museum?
You have no idea. So,
because if we're canceling one, we're canceling them all, are we not? Like some of the most famous photos of World War II Marines posing with dead bodies of of Japanese fighters.
And what's interesting is I started putting together my my presentation on why that should be removed, and how, yes, maybe it's a technically violation of the rules, and yet at the same time you have to have consistency. And I put it out on social media to say, hey, has anybody ever been held accountable for this? Has anybody ever been charged with being in a photo? Because I want to, nobody keeps any statistics on this, so I want to put it together myself. And of course, I got tons of people who said, this happened. I got counseled on it. I got told, hey, don't do it again. I got an unbelievable number of emails and calls from Vietnam veterans who misunderstood my request and were offering to send me their photos of BRCC.
That's priceless.
All these vets, they thought, they were so excited because they thought, hey, if I go into my attic and I dust off the old photos of dead enemy, maybe this can help Eddie Gallagher. And so they, I didn't want to tell them no, because they felt like,
but it's true. I mean, you can go into any museum and these photos are blown up, this big, hanging right there with a smiling U.S. soldier next to a pile of bodies, and that's okay. But here's my second question to that. Then, did everybody that was in that photo get charged with the same thing?
No, nobody else.
And why and how?
They were all given a pass, including the officer who was in the photo. Eddie was not the senior person in the photo.
Wow.
Yeah.
How does this even... funny parenthetical story. As I'm sitting there preparing this, totally separate from that, I read a new book that had just come out called Thank You for My Service. And in it, I'm reading about this guy, Matt Best, who's talking about all the photos that he took with dead bodies. Mandated by the Army, that the Army told him he had to take all these crazy photos. So, which that may have made it into my submission. So the one conviction he had was being in a photo. Yeah. No one else was in trouble for this, but that's what they used to try and take his rank and his retirement away from.
Correct.
While letting everybody else walk away scot-free with nothing on their record.
Correct. Not only that, holding them up as being heroes in the community, because these were the ones who stood up against their chief. The lieutenant who was in the photo, Tom McNeil, who I brought in other photos of him, in Iraq, drunk on a rooftop with all the junior enlisted. He not only got held up as a hero, not charged with anything, he got sent to another team and, put in front of a new bunch of enlisted SEALs and told, this is your officer, follow him. Trust him, he's great.
This whole thing was a mess. I just can't, it disappoints me that no one else was held accountable. Nobody else was in trouble. Like, I can't believe there's not a massive IG case over this, inspecting the entire command down.
And part of the problem here is that the people that got so invested into the theory in the beginning that Eddie was guilty went all the way up the chain of command. And so you have to essentially convince 2-star plus admirals to take the position of, hey, I got totally fooled and I was wrong, so now hold the people accountable.
No, they were like, we went both feet in and there's no turning back. I have to continue dying on this sword. Otherwise, I look like an idiot.
Yeah. Yeah. And there's also an element of, because the president did get involved, there's an element of pushback for that. I've always said that, it was, his involvement was very helpful in certain regards. And in other respects, the moment that the president got involved, as far as the media and certain members in the Pentagon were concerned, the truth kind of became the first casualty, because, okay, now we need to, pursue this as an anti-Trump thing. And,
Yeah. Well, did that
Iraq,
affect your guys' case at all when he said that first tweet?
It did.
Like in a bad way, like, because
No.
I know a lot of people were there was kind of both sides. It was either I saw like, ooh, this was a strategic move on his part because now it involves command influence and it forces them to drop it.
So the first tweet that he made was releasing Eddie from pretrial confinement, and that was the only thing he did before the verdict. All of the other involvement was post acquittal. But when he released him from pretrial confinement, that was major for us. And pretrial confinement is something that is frequently misused as a way to coerce people into pleas. You put somebody in a cell, and then it becomes much more difficult for me to meet with them and to prepare a defense. So getting him out was huge for helping me to prepare. But it also took the media feeding frenzy and brought it up to a much higher level, and of course brought in CNN and New York Times and all these other people to come in and report on what they wanted to report as opposed to what really happened. But ultimately, as far as the jury is concerned, I don't think that it had any effect, but for significantly increasing the quality of my presentation because I could actually prepare with them.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's good. It's been, I'm looking forward to the book. I hope I expect the DOD to hold it up as long as they possibly can in their review.
Hopefully not. I mean, the thing, Eddie Gallagher is one of those guys, he never would have written a book. He was one of those, quiet warriors that just, wanted to do the job.
He's very quiet, very calm, very just, he likes to go out on the boat, hang on the beach.
Yeah, he was not the standard SEAL, which a lot of the guys in his platoon were, the types that their career ambition was to, have a big career as a former Navy SEAL. He was not that type. And so when this happened and he was kind of put into a position where he had to write a book, it's very good. I've read it. I assisted in parts of it. And I don't think the DOD is going to be able to do that much to it because the majority of what it talks about are what happened in the trial and what happened in his home life and stuff.
Yeah, so they can't be nuking things for tactics and procedure and classified material because all this it's all trial stuff.
Exactly. It was if you want to put it on in a courtroom with the New York Times sitting in the back row watching, then you can't redact it out of his book. Yeah,
that is true. So aside from Mr. Gallagher in this case, it's frustrating. I definitely, you and I have had many conversations about the frustrations with that. But what are some other big ones that you really enjoyed, or maybe some of the ones that you thought was like this? No one would take this, but you were like, I have an idea.
So I had an interesting case a few years back. It was an art theft case.
Art theft?
Yeah. An art theft case. And
this isn't something you hear every day.
So the wife came to me and said, hey, my husband's been charged with art theft, and we worked out a deal. And so I went down to the courthouse and everything. I met him, and he told me the most ridiculous, outrageous story that couldn't possibly be true. And I was sitting there thinking, okay, maybe we have a good insanity defense here. His story was that the owner actually paid him to steal the art. And
where was this art stolen from? A house, a gallery?
A house.
So just
Long Island.
Oil paintings on the wall.
Yes.
Okay. All right. We got it. All right. Finish our scenario.
And so then the night before we go in to see the judge, all of a sudden I'm sitting there in my apartment and I see on TV a preview of coming attractions for a new, I think it was ABC reality TV show, Brooklyn DA, where they had camera crews embedded with the investigative team. And there's my client on national TV, a videotape of him taking a Picasso out of a box, putting it in a bag, and then going out to his car. So I go into the judge and I'm like, This would have been helpful to know that they were going to put this thing on national TV. But it turned out, even though they thought they had a rock solid case, they had videotape of him coming to the house, of him going through the paintings, of him picking out these specific paintings, taking him, out of the house. They catch him, on the street outside. All the vehicles come in and do an interdiction, and
That's what goes on in Long Island for art theft. Is SWAT rolls out. Oh my God, we got a guy stealing paintings.
And so they had this whole big thing on their TV show about it. And yet, the more I went into it, that crazy story he told me about how the owner did this, evidence kept coming up that it was true. There was insurance claims. There was, right before he did this, he went and overinsured them for 10 times the actual value.
Wow, and that's not a dead giveaway.
Yeah, it was insane. And so all of a sudden I got all this evidence. I go into, we went into trial, and I'm all raring to go. My guy's been kept in pretrial confinement the whole time. But I'm ready to go. We're 5 minutes away from picking a jury. All of a sudden the judge looks at me and says, so the prosecutor and I go up to the bench. He looks around and he says, guys, I don't want to try this case. Okay. If your guy pleads guilty, I'll let him go home today. Will he take time served? Well, I'm sure he'll take time served, but the problem is, he's got to admit that he did something wrong. And, what do you want him to say on this stuff? Because I know the prosecutors want him to admit to certain things that aren't true. Just like, yeah, I don't care about that. Just admit to the statute, and I'll let him go home today. Okay. I went and told my guy, and he's like, so all I have to do is admit that I actually took the paintings out of the house, which I did.
Yeah, he did.
And I don't have to address the fact of whether the owner asked me to do it or not. Then I get to go home. Yeah, okay. So he went home that day.
And was it just who was involved that possibly sparked that, or?
There was a lot of pretrial litigation and stuff, and I had subpoenaed all the outtakes from the documentary thing, and there was a big issue of, is reality TV, really, does that have the same protections as the media, the press, and everything? And there was such a messy case that it would have been a total circus for a trial, and the judge, I think, made the right decision that, we don't need this circus. Let's just, Tim, you've made your point. Take your toys and go home.
I got it. Just get out of here. Get out of here. What's one that you were just super happy to win, like because, someone was getting shafted and you jumped in and found everything you needed to find and, righted a wrong. That's what I like to hear. Those are the ones I like to hear.
There have been several of those. Obviously, Eddie. A few years ago,
you're still trying to right that wrong. It's a very open wrong wound.
Still working on that one. So, do you remember a few years back, there were 3 guys who parachuted off the top of the new number 1 World Trade Center?
I don't know. Think I'm sure I heard of it.
Yeah, they were base jumpers,
okay.
and they snuck into One World Trade, the new Freedom Tower, and they parachuted off the top. They had GoPros on their helmets, which was the most unbelievable footage. And they didn't get caught that night, but they did this whole big investigation, and they hired me, and I called up the prosecutor to try and handle the thing quietly. But because the DA was looking at this as a political issue for his reelection campaign, he wanted to make a big thing of it.
I don't see how that, just in the logic of me being the public, a DA going after 3 base jumpers that did not affect my life at all doesn't make me want to vote for him anymore. It makes me think he's wasting my time and my money.
Right. Well, he wanted to put him in jail for 7 years.
What?
Yeah. Yeah. And I told him from the beginning, I said, look, this is a misdemeanor. It's trespassing. We'll do community service. And I said to them, before anybody knew what happened, I said to him, let's do this quickly. Let's do this quietly. We'll come in on a Tuesday night. We'll just come in. We'll do a very simple plea, get out the back door, do community service, and that's it. We don't need to publicize this. Nobody needs to know that there's no security at the number one terrorist target in the world.
Yeah.
But they just got stupid with it, and they decided, okay, well, we're gonna make a big media circus, and they did. And they charged them with burglary under the theory that in New York state law, unlawfully entering or remaining in a structure with intent to commit a crime therein is burglary. It doesn't have to be stealing. And the crime that they committed was base jumping. It's a New York City Administrative Code violation that thou shalt not jump off of a building from a height of more than 25 feet. So that's what we had a 2.5-week jury trial over. And
God, it was a 2.5-week trial.
My defense is the most, and I recognize this is going to sound real geeky lawyery on you, but intend to commit a crime therein. Therein, that means inside the building. Base jumping, by its very nature, is they're out. They were on the roof. They jumped off the building. And
you won with that?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
They're in, they're out.
The first time, so I raised this thing, and I'm talking with the district attorney, trying to get him to be reasonable. And I realized how unreasonable he was going to be when he looks at me and says, let me tell you why you're wrong. Oh, boy, here we go.
Oh, let's go with this one.
So under your theory, if somebody breaks into a building with a rifle and goes out onto a balcony and shoots somebody and kills them, they get away with it because it happened outside. I'm like, actually, no, dude, you can still charge them with murder.
Yeah. Yeah, that's called murder.
It's just not a burglary.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it was such a silly case, but, serious for these guys. And I got the judge to order them to allow me to go to the top of the World Trade Center myself and, to where they actually jumped from, which is much higher than the observation deck. And so, we go up there. The prosecutor demanded to go with. The judge ordered him to stay away from me. We get up there, get out on the roof, and then look up and find, okay, we have to go another 100 feet up in the air up this vertical ladder. And it was windy that day. So that was fun. We go up to the top, and the prosecutor's like right on my back. And I'm looking at him like, all right, you got to get the hell away from me. Because I'm there with my client, and he's going to show me how they did this thing, but you can't listen in. You got to go away. I said, no, I'm standing right here. And so we get into an argument. A Port Authority detective grabs the prosecutor and physically moves him to the other side of the building. And as he's dragging the prosecutor away, I look around at him. I look up, and I just to stick the knife in him a little bit. I don't know about you, but I've never felt more outside in my entire life than I do up here right now. So, and then at trial, it was just so silly, some of the things that they were doing. They explained how they caught them, where they had the ring of steel, all these thousands of cameras downtown, and they saw them land, and they tracked them and what vehicle they got in, and license plate readers, and figured out all this.
That doesn't matter. It's not part of the case.
1984 kind of stuff. For something that my guys have already admitted that they've done. Hell, we put the videos on YouTube, and so this detective is very proud of himself as to the millions of dollars that they've spent onto this system. And I get up and I cross-examine them. I start with, so all these cameras, are any of them pointed at the perimeter of the building? Well, no. So you don't have any video of them getting into the building? Just getting out? Well, no, we don't. Wouldn't it be more important to make sure that we catch people before they enter into the number one terrorist target in the world instead of catching them after they land a few blocks away? It was, and that's one of those things where when you do that and you look over at the jury, and the jury is sitting there more offended by the stupidity of our government officials than by the
case at hand. It's like,
right. So that was definitely a wrong that we righted.
that is a wild. I did not expect that. a base jumping case.
There are attorneys that specialize in certain types of cases, and I've always said that I specialize in weird.
That's okay. Well, we've got an art theft, base jumping. What's the weirdest then?
The weirdest thing? There's so many. there's so many. Eddie's certainly one of the most unexpected.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's a wild and varied history.
Well, these are outstanding. Now, you have a very interesting law firm now. It's big. You have a big law firm.
Yeah.
How many lawyers you got under you?
So 20 right now. We're adding our 21st later this week.
That is amazing. And you kind of you do something a little different. Explain how your stuff works, because you seem a little ahead of the game right now.
Yeah. So my firm's been around for about 2 years now, and it's a cloud-based model. So my whole theory is we don't use any buildings whatsoever. Everybody works remotely, and we've done it for long before COVID. By doing that, you cut down on all the overhead, because all these traditional old firms, they spend millions of dollars a month on rent, and I spend very little. Our main office, and you'll understand the symbolism now that I told you the last story, is 85th floor of One World Trade Center. If I had a physical office there just for me, just a tiny little office, that would cost me like 30 or 40 grand a month. Wow. Instead, I have a mailbox there that cost me $100 a month. So what it allows me to do is, by cutting down all that overhead, I can charge the clients a far more reasonable rate. I can pay the attorneys a lot more, and I can bring in a lot of attorneys that, because of various life circumstances, they can't really go to a physical office every single day. So over half of my attorneys are married to active duty military personnel, and who traditionally have a terrible time trying to get jobs because the military keeps telling their spouse to move around every 2 years, and all attorneys are licensed by state. Mm-hmm. So,
that is very difficult.
Yeah. So, I have a patent attorney who's, absolutely brilliant patent attorney, licensed in New York, and any other firm would love to have her. But since she decided to marry a Marine, nobody will hire her. With me, she's perfect. She provides great service for the clients. She has a New York office address. She has a New York phone number. You call her on that phone number, she picks up, and nobody cares that she's sitting in Hawaii.
That's amazing.
Yeah, it works great. It works great. So, we're expanding. We're expanding rapidly. I'm trying to cover all the different practice areas. Everything that entrepreneurs can possibly need, because you have these big firms that have the few hundred lawyers and all the different practice areas, and it's the total package that you need when you're building a business. But most people building a business can't afford $1,000 an hour.
Yeah, no kidding.
So we do all of that without the building, so we can provide that complete service to entrepreneurs at a price point they can actually afford.
That's amazing. So what are some of the practices that you have under your umbrella, just in case, like I said, very few people ever research the different types of attorneys that you would need, but now having you on the show, the Parlatore Group, what do you have? What could you help people with if they needed it?
We've got intellectual property, patents, copyright and trademark. We have corporate contracts, tax, employment, anything. I designed it specifically under the idea of, if somebody, and of course in my hypothetical, it's always a veteran, comes up with an idea and wants to build a business, everything they need to build the business, we can do. We figure out what kind of corporate structure they need, incorporate that, figure out all the agreements that they need, set all the employment policies. If they need to, build a factory, help them with the commercial real estate aspect of it. if they're going to be a government contractor and want to figure out how do they do this to where they can get contract preferences with the U.S. government, do all that, do all the negotiations. If they get in trouble, we do the regulatory compliance and, of course, litigation. And if they get stuck stabbing a terrorist, then we can do that too. So
it's a one-stop shop over there, Tim.
Exactly. We do everything but divorce.
Awesome.
We won't do family law because
that's a monster in itself. I remember Netflix did that documentary called Divorce Inc. That was wild.
It's the depressing area of business, and I prioritize my people being happy.
Yes, so. It is. It's miserable.
Yeah.
It's let's take all your money and then tell you guys you both got to settle.
Yeah. It sucks.
That's the one piece of advice I would give anybody looking for a divorce: hire an accountant, not an attorney.
It's true.
I've seen it. Like I even my accountant that I deal with out in Florida, same thing. He's had a few where they came to him. He then objectively lays out everything that the state has, and then they come up to an agreement, and they get a lawyer to come in right at the end to make sure it's official. And that was the best, cleanest divorce that he's ever seen. It's like,
yeah, it makes sense. I mean, when I was doing a lot of heavy criminal work in New York City, a buddy of mine who's a divorce lawyer, he explained it to me perfectly. He said, Tim, as a criminal lawyer, you deal with some pretty terrible people. But because of the nature of the relationship and the case, they're always putting their best foot forward with you. I, on the other hand, deal with generally pretty decent people. But because we're dealing with the divorce, they're always putting their worst foot forward. And
that's true. Wild. You're absolutely right, though.
I'd rather deal with a gangster than somebody going through a divorce.
Yeah, that is probably. Yeah, because number one, they're going to be in a very up, kind of hopeful mood when they're talking to you. Not.
Yeah.
That is funny. Well, hey Tim, where can people find you at if anybody needs your services or anything? Where can they go?
So Parlatore Law Group is the name of the firm, and we're on all the social media platforms, and our website is Parlatore Law Group, PARLATORE, lawgroup.com.
Right there in the screen too. Well, hey, thanks for chatting with us. And I think, a couple months from now, we'll have you back, do an update, come up with some more cases. I love hearing about these crazy things.
Yeah, that's the beauty of being a lawyer is you get all these insane stories.
Awesome, Tim. Well, take care.
All right. Thank you very much.